Well, the anthropic principle is not necessarily a religious thing. I believe in A Brief History of Time, Stephen Hawking refers to it, and in that book he says he's open to God. God might exist, God might not. I don't really know. But what I do know is the anthropic principle, and then he explains it. It's been a while since I was reading that book, so forgive me if I am misrepresenting something there. But atheists, agnostics are comfortable if they're physicists or astrobiologists, cosmologists, what have you. The point is the anthropic principle is a principle of science, not a principle of religion. All right, so quoting from the Wall Street Journal, Gould is writing the direct quote: "What this means is that complex carbon-based life, namely us, can exist only in a universe which the physical constants have been tuned just so. Take the ratio of gravity to electromagnetism. If gravity were a tiny bit stronger, we'd be pulled apart. If electromagnetism were a tiny bit stronger, we'd fall in on ourselves like failed souffles." And Gould says, yes, but so what? The weak version of the anthropic principle only tells us that life fits well with nature's laws and couldn't exist if the laws were even the tiniest bit different. Interesting, but I see no religious implications. And in fairness, neither do most syncretists. Thus, their own designation as weak. The strong version provides my favorite example of illogic in high places. Since human life couldn't exist if the laws of nature were even a tad different, then the laws must be as they are because a creating God desired our presence. Okay, well, and this is really the heart of the fine-tuning argument. Um, Gould says the weak version of the anthropic principle only tells us that life fits well with nature's laws and couldn't exist if the laws were even the tiniest bit different. Interesting, but I see no religious implications. Well, let's think about that. Um, the idea that he's kind of leaving out of this um, passage is that the, the 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 for the universe to be life permitting, things have to be just so. But they don't have to be just so. They could be many different ways, perhaps an infinite number of different ways that things could have been, but they turned out to be just so. Goldilocks. Too hot, too cold, just right. The porridge of the three bears. That's what the uh, universe is. It can't be too hot or too cold. It has to be just right. Why would the universe that could have been in very many different ways, why does it just happen to be right for life? If Christianity is true, then there is a God who fiddled with the knobs of the constants, the ratio of gravity to electromagnetism, for example, so that it would be just right in his omniscience, so that life would be able to live and to thrive, at least on Earth, within the universe. Perhaps on other planets as well, if that was part of his plan. So that is a religious implication. It's not a scientific implication, um, but it is a validly inferred implication from the fact that the universe is finely tuned for life. Probably there is a God, because if there wasn't a God, probably the fine tuning wouldn't be so finely tuned. there wouldn't be fine-tuning, probably, unless God exists. But then he talks about the strong version of the anthropic principle, um, and he says, since human life couldn't exist if the laws of nature were even a tad different, then the laws must be as they are because a creating God desired our presence. Right. If human life couldn't exist, if the laws of nature were even a little bit different, and they could have been a little bit different, or a lot bit different, then the laws probably are as they are because a creating God desired our presence. Otherwise, the universe probably wouldn't be fine-tuned and we wouldn't find ourselves here. What is the problem with this? Why isn't that compelling to uh, Dr. Gould? This argument, he goes on to say, reduces to pure nonsense based on the unstated premise which destroys the strong anthropic principle by turning it into a classic example of circular reasoning, that humans arose for good and necessary reasons, and that whatever allowed us to get here must therefore exist to fulfill our destiny. And I have to admit, at this point, I'm really not sure what he's getting at. It seems like he's creating a massive non sequitur, but maybe I just don't understand what he's saying. But I do find it interesting that he brings up circular reasoning, because that is a charge that young Earth creationists often bring against evolutionists, that their dating methods are circular. Alright, so without this premise, which I regard as silly, arrogant, and utterly unsupported, the strong anthropic principle, hold on, collapses upon the equal plausibility of this opposite interpretation, and I have to go. I'll do one more video. Thank you.